I'm Kevin Moriarty, Artistic Director of Dallas Theater Center. I'm filming this video at my home as all of us at our theater continue to shelter in place during this pandemic. But even as our stages are dark, we're diligently working to become a stronger, better theater for Dallas when we are able to finally return to full operations at some point in 2021. Like so many Americans across the country, we're using this time of pause to reflect and address longstanding, deep-rooted issues of racism, of white supremacy, and anti-Blackness within our own organization. Today, I'd like to share with you a few thoughts about where we are on that journey in our artistic work and my own personal commitment to this essential effort. In 1959, when Dallas Theater Center opened, Dallas was a city deep in the throes of white supremacy. In the years since then, our theater, like the city it was founded to serve, has had a long and frankly at times painful struggle to transform itself from a theater that fully welcomed only some of us into being a theater that fully welcomes all of us. Though DTCs often supported the work of artists of color and told stories of diverse cultural experiences all throughout our history, nonetheless, racism has had a powerful influence on us for many, many years. For instance, in more than 60 years of our theater's history, all of our artistic directors have been white men. The vast majority of the plays we've produced have been acted, written, directed, and designed by white artists. A majority of our audience has been white. To be clear, when I share these facts with you, I'm not indicting a distant history of choices made by others. I'm speaking personally. As the theater's artistic director, I'm ultimately responsible for curating our programming and hiring artists. And yet, here are a few examples of ways in which I have failed to live up as a leader to the values that our theater espouses. While the actors that you've seen on our stage for many years have included outstanding artists of color, many years, often more than half the actors in a season have been people of color. Behind the scenes, it's been a very different situation. Until just 2 years ago, Dallas Theater Center had never programmed a subscription season in which a majority of the plays were written by and directed by people of color. For instance, in 2009, when we opened our new theater building, all 5 of the productions were written by white writers and directed by white directors. I chose those plays and I hired those directors. To make matters worse, and despite my genuine belief at the time that I was deeply committed to advancing racial equity within our theater, I didn't even consciously recognize this fact until just a couple years ago when I began to study and reflect deeply about the influence of unconscious bias and systemic racism and anti-Blackness and how together those things uphold white supremacy. As I've looked into our artistic past at Dallas Theater Center, alongside the moments of immense artistry and stories that have spoken deeply to the human condition, I now also realize many instances in which we failed to fully live up to our mission, our vision, and our values, to inspire new ways of thinking and living for our diverse community by telling stories that reflect our varied experiences. Not just the stories of white people, but of all of us. Dallas stories and the glorious diversity that is the great strength of our beloved city. To do this well, we need to empower and support artists of color to tell their own stories with agency and autonomy, which we've often failed to do. For instance, at many times during DTC's history, including during my own tenure as artistic director, we've produced well-meaning plays that told stories about racial injustice that were written by white writers, directed by white directors, designed by predominantly white creative teams. So while the actors on the stage were Black, the majority of the people off stage were white, including many of the creative leaders of those productions. I regret that. I take responsibility for it, and I am determined to be an agent of change as we move forward. In the past several years, we've committed ourselves to undoing this painful legacy, to not only expanding the stories we tell, but also expanding the diversity of the artists who are telling those stories. For the first time in our history, in our past 2 subscription seasons, more than half of the artists working at our theater have been artists of color: playwrights, actors, directors, designers. This commitment has strengthened our artistry. It's made us more successful at fulfilling our mission. And our community has stepped forward and embraced those productions. When we return from the pandemic and we're able to again create full productions for live audiences in our theater spaces, we intend to continue. We intend to deepen that commitment. And in addition to guaranteeing that the majority of the artists who write, direct, design, and act in our productions at Dallas Theater Center will continue to be people of color, we're also putting policies in place to ensure that our artists are treated equitably in all of their interactions with our staff, our audiences, our board, and our donors. We're working to diversify our predominantly white artistic and production staff who support the work of the artists at the theater, and we're committed to rethinking our artistic processes to be more inclusive, to share decision-making power more equitably. We're rethinking how we conduct auditions, how we support the development of new plays, how we provide anti-racism training for everyone throughout our company, how we ensure respect and dignity for all when interacting with each other, whether in the rehearsal process, with donors at special events, with audience members in post-show talkbacks. When anyone interacts with Dallas Theater Center, we want that experience to be one of mutual respect, of dignity, a recognition of our common shared humanity. In the coming weeks and months, we're going to post online details of our new policies. We'll be transparent in our progress. We'll announce specific initiatives and programming that will not only transform our theater, but also allow us to be held accountable by you, our community. Though at times this work has been difficult and painful, it's mostly been fueled by hope. I've been inspired not only by the long overdue racial reckoning that's occurring throughout our country and the wise policy of ideas that a national group of Black theater artists who've written an open letter to theaters across the country demanding change under the hashtag We See You White American Theater. But I've also been inspired by our staff, whose dedication to equity, diversity, and inclusion is deep and fearless. Many of them are people of color, and they are engaging in these conversations in a predominantly white institution, which can be emotionally difficult for them, but they persist. They persist because they know that what is at stake is so important. Our city that we love needs our theater to reflect those who we serve as our community. All of us coming together to share our full selves with honesty, with pride, with joy. I'm eager to continue this journey with our Dallas Theater Center community, and I invite you to join us. All are welcome here. I'll see you at the theater.